Hey everyone, today we have Michael, who is the founder and CEO of Airsset. Now, Airsset is a data and analytics platform that's built on top of IoT devices, which collect indoor air quality data. They then turn this data into information, and their industry partners turn that into building improvements. Now, this isn't Michael's first company. He has been the CEO and founder of multiple companies, but always working on innovations to make places where people spend the most time a better, healthier, and sustainable experience for everyone. Michael, really excited to have you here. Welcome. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thanks, Shaheem. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on our show. So, Michael, you're obviously solving a lot of big problems in this world, but what I want to know is, where did it all start?
Well, we are solving big problems. I'm the pusher of innovative ideas, but instituted by other people. It's funny, yeah. Both of the companies that I founded with a business partner, a green building services company back in 2012. So we have 10 years now. Mm-hmm. And so everyone asks, well, what's innovation in the building world? And the answer is sustainability. Right? Like sustainability is the innovation lead, and all these ratings fit well, and reset, and all these green building rating systems. But the number one problem with all of it is that solar panels exist, and our 100 windows, like all these things exist. The problem, all of our problems currently are software problems. So essentially, a lot of it was and then it became a prop tech problem. So out of Edge Consultants, which was the first company started, which is now 10 years old, amazing partners in that company is just rocking it in the world of green building services, doing energy modeling. Mm-hmm. So basically creating a digital twin and then making sure that it meets building code requirements. Very technical, boring stuff for most SaaS founders, but I always say that the building world is the last analog place. Mm-hmm. Like cars are digital, right? Like if you think of a modern car, there's heating in the right seat, different from the left seat. There's a backup camera, a forward camera. There are cameras looking all the way out. A building is a 1971 Lada. Basically, it will tell you the speed. You don't even know if the engine's on. And like if you're moving, the engine's on. Yeah. And that's it. Like the buildings are basically offline. People don't know what's happening inside of buildings. So Operto was really focused on trying to make, as the first software startup, was trying to make hotels more efficient because hotels run exactly the same, whether or not it's 100% occupancy or 40% occupancy, meaning that it's being heated and cooled if there's nobody in there. And that's a massive number. So basically the idea was, well, can we reduce the energy consumption? But then we realized, wow, there's all these other pieces, right? People are still physically handing keys to people, right? Very ineffective, very inefficient. So then it became this entire exercise of building out an entire guest experience platform. And they've done a phenomenal job, that team, with that. But my passion's always been commercial buildings. Because I spend most of my time in commercial buildings. I don't spend much in hotels or Airbnbs, and offices and factories and that kind of thing, because that's my world as a consultant. So Airsset and Operto always started out of problems from the consulting business. Interesting. And on the Airsset side, it's just the way it goes. And so Airsset started because we had an Edge client that here was the one thing, they didn't even know what the temperature was in their space. Brand new office, 2 years old, thermostats with no views. This is actually very common. So you have no idea what the temperature is in your spaces. So if someone says they're too hot or too cold, it's an opinion, but it's not really. What is the real number?
Defeats the purpose of like a thermostat, right? That's what it's supposed to kind of tell you.
Well, and here's the other crazy thing about thermostats is, if you think about it, buildings are only controlled for comfort. That is all. And so one of the problems with this building was we were pretty sure, because they were a subtenant, that they were not going to get enough outdoor airflow as the building filled up. So now you have an air quality issue. So that's effective. We built a platform around this problem, and it's because I always say this: buildings are controlled for comfort. They're not controlled for efficiency. They're not controlled for health and risk reduction. They're only controlled for comfort. Which, if you think about it, moving forward, does anyone want that after the pandemic that we just that we're going through and that's ending? There's a reason that cold and flu and COVID season is in the winter, because in the winter, you have to increase outdoor air rates.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you heat the air, you dry it out, and you create the perfect conditions for viruses. And that's why it's like that. But it's always been that way. Like the pandemic's no different than a cold and flu season.
Right.
It's just, I think everything has gone from being vague. I think that I'm hot. I think that I'm cold, to landlord must supply adequate outdoor air or adequate airflow.
Yeah.
So now it's moving from adequate to 900 parts per million CO2, exactly 20 to 23 degrees Celsius, relative humidity between 30 and 70%. Do you know what I mean? Like it's gone from vague to specific.
Wow. Yeah. That's so kind of what you're saying there is like COVID highlighted the importance of, it's always been happening. This is just, it's been it's always been going on, but COVID really highlighted the importance of it. But for myself, like as someone from the outside looking in, I'm thinking, Michael, you're in this commercial buildings space. Like that's where your businesses are, right? Your Edge, Airsset, etc. COVID happens, you get hit hard. Nobody's in these commercial buildings anymore, at least for like a year. How did that impact you? It depended
on the type of commercial building, right? Like the offices are empty, but the restaurants, daycares, branch, like there's factories, places where you can't, you're not going to move your entire assembly line.
Right.
What people forget is that a lot of us had the luxury of working from home. Most people, like the blue collar, did not.
Right.
So we ended up working a great deal with industrial clients who had to, and they already have their own issues at an industrial level. For example, like you've got clients where the way that they find out that the chemicals in the air are too high is someone's eyes start to water, and then they turn on a fan. So it's manual.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is a new problem in any way. It's also like, if you think about the meatpacking plants, remember in the beginning of the pandemic, all the meatpacking plants were having outbreaks. And, obviously they're too close together, but the number one thing is perfect conditions for viruses, cold and dry. Again, like this is just sort of the problem. And the reason that we can never sort of combat it is homes are actually the worst, because homes are the worst ventilated spaces. They're the worst ventilated spaces, and also there's usually no humidification. So this is why most spreads are family spreads really quickly.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. So Michael, like, you're obviously very passionate about this space, and you've built companies around it. So first, like, some of our listeners who are passionate about what they're doing, they're, either starting to build a company or kind of halfway, through that process. What did you learn when you're going out there in the world and starting a company? Like, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned, especially around something where I would say, again, as a third person listening in, it's the benefits are there, like health benefits and things are there, but for a lot of people, it's like out of sight, out of mind. So was it a challenge bringing this to market?
It's always a challenge to bring something new to market, because it's like the advantage that we had at Operto over what we have at Airsset is that at least the market's really, really narrow for Operto, right? Like not facilities managers, sorry. Your audience is selling to hotel managers and Airbnb managers, right? That's very narrow market, and you're building for that. The thing about air is we all breathe air. And facilities management in a commercial building is very complicated. So you got to build value for each component, because you've got the facilities managers, the HVAC services companies, the trucks you see around that say HVAC services, heating, cooling. But you've also got indoor air quality consultants that come in and they'll do audits to make sure that you're compliant either with work safe requirements or something like that. So what we've learned, like Airsset is a bit of a longer learning curve than it is at Operto, but it's also, the market size is so much larger. But so the good and bad thing about a large market size is it's very difficult. Like if you're going to spend marketing money, where do you spend it?
Yeah.
Like I have, it was very easy. Like it was like Airbnb, these PMSs, super easy. I've got daycares. I got bank branches, hospitals, like offices, like where do you where do you spend your marketing money? So we've been building out a partner focus, which because there are people that work inside of these buildings, and so basically we're all about partnerships. So that was how we focused. That was the lesson that we learned, was that we could never tackle this on our own. It's just too large of a problem. So that's a big lesson. Sometimes you find existing channels and you use them. That's probably the best lesson.
Yeah, fair enough. So like kind of like a one piece of advice for founders to consider is, if you do have a product that can serve a very large market, try to get in through partners, because it's true, you can't just go out, you can never capture everybody. Like where do you even start, right? So no,
it's all about sales channels. I always say that you can make the best beer in the world, but if you're going to walk down the sidewalk and try and sell it on the street, no one's going to buy from you. Right. If you sell it to the pub, you're fine. Right. So find the channel, right? Like find the channels.
Fair enough. And so these companies, were they bootstrapped, fundraising? Let's talk about that.
There's no other way in Canada, I don't think, other than a boost. Plus no one, I don't know, it's venture, all kinds of, everyone says show me. Yeah. So they were all originally bootstrapped. Obviously Operto just their Series A now, but we Operto closed their Series A just recently. But it was Operto was bootstrapped from 2016 to 2019 for 3 years. Wow. Because I mean no one got it, no one could get it, no one could picture it, no one could imagine it. So same, it's a little bit different though. Like we're in like our customers tend to get Airsset a little bit more, especially the pandemic's been helpful for that part of it. Pandemic's also been super helpful for Operto, right? Like no one wants to meet in person, no one wants to be handed a key card anymore, right? Like just let me in there. So the pandemic has done a lot of good things, but it's also it's a big excuse for not doing anything also. So it's also been the reason you see all these HVAC trucks running around right now is because everybody's buildings were off and now they're turning on again. So imagine remember how like sometimes your grandmother's car, if it wasn't driven for a long time, it wouldn't turn on. That's what's happening right now at these buildings.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what are some of, I guess, like, so it's challenging, I assume, to, build a company for 3 years, especially like a software company, a tech company. What are the challenges that you found having, bootstrapped, but also what are some of the benefits of bootstrapping?
No one wants to bootstrap, to be honest. And I've always been a big believer that you're not trying to, your outcome is not, your total ownership share. It's you want a good outcome. Like you don't want to optimize for your what you get, you optimize for the company's value. But the challenge for the companies that I've always started is they're niche, and there are markets that most people don't understand. It's consumer markets are a lot easier for people to really get excited about, right? Like everybody buys this, everyone buys real estate, everyone wants to buy real estate, everyone rents in real estate. So why most of the fintech is in those spaces, but they're crowded, very crowded. It's not crowded for us in the same way. It's slightly less crowded. So you have the opportunity when you bootstrap in markets like that to actually make revenue and be able to extend longer. But it's harder because in some ways you're not building out the market, but you're building out the understanding of that paradigm shift, right? That like literally people are going from, they have no idea what's happening in their building, to now I know everything. So I'll give you an example. We're doing 55 member branches for Van City, and Van City's only got, I think it's 5 or 6 facilities people that help work on it. So imagine you've got at least 10 that you've got to figure out in a month. Okay, well, what do I do? How do I fix them? You have no idea what's going on except to physically visit them. So now through the Airsset platform, they can see everything that's happening. They can tell if a cleaning is happening because the VOCs are going to spike. They can tell how many people are probably in the branch based on CO2, but they can also tell if there's, dust issues, right? Which might mean a clogged filter. So the data is invaluable. Like the amount of time it saves you is crazy.
Wow. So I guess so switching gears to that now, in terms of like the problems you're actually solving for your real customers, let's talk about that. What are the tangible benefits that your customers are seeing once they do buy into this paradigm shift?
Yeah, that's the one I just mentioned is probably it's like, how much time does that save you?
Yeah.
and also risk and liability. Like one of the biggest things is that usually most people aren't familiar with air quality consultants. I always have to explain what they do. But historically, most of the time they'd come along after a complaint. So someone would make a workplace violation complaint, and they'd come along and they'd assess and say, here's my report, this is what you need to do. But over the years, people have gotten proactive and said, well, I'm going to do an audit every quarter, every year. And so we were sort of working inside of that space. So the challenge with that is they're bringing in the device, they're recording the data, and then they take it away. So instead of getting 1 week's worth of data, we'll give you 52 weeks worth of data, and you don't need to keep going back and forth. Also, our platform automatically creates the reporting for the consultants. And all they have to do is write their interpretation of the data. They don't have to do a CSV export, create all their own graphs, create all their own match. It just automatically kicks it out. So basically, like I said, we had to build the value for each component of how the cycle works. We had to work backwards from the way the industry functions. So right now, our biggest focus is working with HVAC services companies, because it's the same thing, right? They're used to doing visual inspections, looking around, what's broken, what needs to be fixed, and also opinions, right? You'll get people think that they're cold. People think it's stuffy. Stuffy is usually a CO2. Sometimes it's VOCs. People think it's dust. This goes from like opinions to facts. So
right.
And you'll go, well, here's what's really happening. and here's the floor that we need to go to. I understand you think there's an issue on this floor, but it's actually on this floor. And if we fix this one thing, and it'll be grand. It's the time saving, it's the liability, and also like from an employer perspective, I've always said that like energy savings is nice, but the amount of money you spend as an employer on your utility bills is nothing compared to what you spend on salaries. And if the CO2 level in the spaces we're in right now goes above 1,200 parts per million, we're gonna sound sleepy. This is what happens in a meeting. You know how when you're in a meeting, everyone starts getting sleepy?
Yeah. That's happening.
That's what that is.
It's just
so
CO2.
If you take that in, exactly, let's put a dollar value to that, right? Let's put a dollar value to everybody. Sleepy past 132. Everyone knows this. Everyone remembers like 132.
Always.
It's not. It's air quality.
Oh.
So yeah, it's an air quality problem. Casinos have figured it out, right? Casinos just constantly pump in.
That's true. Yeah.
But
that's
at
true.
a massive energy penalty. So you can actually do this. Also, you ends up with quite dry air. And you end up with all kinds of other issues. So because we're trying to balance these two things together, saving energy and providing good air quality, how do you balance saving energy and having good air quality when all you have is a thermostat? It's impossible. It can't be done. It can't be done.
Absolutely. No, I totally see it. I used to work for a startup, and they had an office like in one of those like shared office floors. And so I was in a room with like two other people, and it was like a tiny office, no windows, no nothing. And I swear, like, 11, 12-ish, I am falling asleep. And I was in sales too. I need to be high energy, right?
Yes.
But no, I can't. I would go for a walk. I would feel so good. Come back in 30 minutes later, I'm down again.
Yeah. So you're getting 4 hours out of an 8-hour day.
Yeah.
Right. What's the cost of that?
Right.
Sure, like our focus has been, because the people that own the buildings and run the buildings and can control them, those are the people that we have to work with, because they're the ones that able to fix your problem. But ultimately, you guys have to be the voice going, this is unacceptable.
Right.
If I'm falling asleep, it's not because I'm tired, right? It's because of people are starting to be educated on these things too now, right? Everyone knows what's in the air. Everyone's concerned about what's in the air.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. See, back then I would just get another cup of coffee. I'm like, maybe I just need more coffee, but no, that's not it. So fair enough.
Everyone thinks that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of our first projects, was an office like that. And we fixed it. We fixed it with an Airsset monitor.
Yeah.
And we adjusted the fan. That's it. No other things.
What?
And it was like, and we came back and everyone was like, I feel so great all of a sudden. I can work all the way till 6. I don't have to have 3 cups of coffee in the afternoon. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So Michael, what do you have planned for the future now? And I feel like, and I don't know, I could be off the mark here, but you're collecting a lot of valuable data. So yes, you're solving, the problems right now for these businesses, but now, as you said, you can now see things, like you have data about buildings that you never had before. So what do you plan if you do, where do you plan to take that? And what's the future of Airsset looking like?
The future of Airsset is really it's more about putting the money to these things. So right now we're really focused on working with the facilities managers who can actually affect the change, the partners who can come up with the solutions, like that one that Edge did, where they just changed the fan. But the real integrations that I'm excited about are to things like productivity software, like how many, like coders coding, how productive are they? So if we can tie that to air quality, there's been research being done around that, where they test students and they check their test scores. And the 3 biggest things that affect test scores, which will obviously be the same for offices and production facilities, et cetera, are CO2, VOCs, so chemicals in the air, and temperature. Because you've been in a hot environment, it's very difficult to work when it's 35 degrees. You just feel like laying down. So connecting to software like that, HR software to track sick days. We're doing research in senior care facilities with Arizona State around sleep, because air quality is huge for sleep. Very, very big. I mean, we evolved outside, right? We evolved outside at 490 parts per million CO2. So if you're trying to go to sleep in 1400 parts per million CO2, very hard to sleep. It's very hard to sleep. Also, have you ever had, you're in Canada, right? You ever been to a hotel in the prairies in February?
I have. Oh, actually, no, I have. I was in Edmonton in February, in an office building and like an Airbnb type of situation, not a hotel.
Okay, so a hotel, you will wake up mummified. Like literally you are dried out because the air is so dried out.
Oh, it is really dry. I remember it's so dry, even in that Airbnb. It's nuts. Yeah.
You wake up feeling mummified, like your lips are, you're all
seriously,
chapped, your nose is dry. And they also have trouble sleep. It's because the relative humidity is like 9%.
Yeah.
When, it's supposed to be 30 to 40. So you can't sleep well when the conditions are like that. Humidity is huge. Like the 2 biggest factors for sleep are humidity and CO2. And the biggest factors for cognitive performance are CO2, temperature. Humidity is not a big one, and VOCs. So and then virus is different. Virus is humidity, temperature, a little bit CO2. That's more like the amount in the air. But then also nitrogen dioxide and dust, right? Dust is another big factor because it likes to ride on dust. Like really dusty environments, they find that viral spread's a little bit better.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So Michael, you know so much about this. I can just tell like how passionate you are. And I feel like, beyond even Airsset, like, and you've been like all your companies have been around the same kind of, in the same space. What is your vision for the future? Like, how do you ideally, like after you, move on from this world and everything, like how do you envision like your future or like the world's future? Sorry.
Well, it's because it is like, we've got a climate crisis, right? Simultaneously. We've got the pandemic. We've got forest fires raging. I mean, and air quality is, it's a social justice issue, right? Like the outdoor air quality part has been addressed at the government level, but it hasn't for indoors. And you spend 90% of your time inside. So it's like, oh, congratulations, government. You've managed to regulate 10% of the time of where I spend my time.
Right.
Like, so what? Like if And so the pandemic is going to be that trigger. So I think it was 1952, they had the Great Smog in London, where I think it was like 12,000 people died from this giant, it was coal-fired power plants, basically. Made it so 1,200 to 12,000, they can't tell. It takes a couple of days for everyone to start trickling into the hospitals and passing away. But it took a good 6-7 years before they came out with the Clean Air Act. Like the UK was the first to have a Clean Air Act. Do you know when Canada's was? The 90s. The mid 90s is when Canada had a Clean Air Act. So I sort of see a future where we sort of put our money where our mouth is, and we actually do the things that really matter and stay focused on them, like climate change, like the fact that we're going to spend even more time inside, in even higher air conditioned spaces. Like you went through this summer with me in Vancouver, right? Like, is there any point in not putting cooling into buildings at this stage?
No,
like, that's
like,
over. Yeah. So that was the green building thing for 10 years when I was in green building. It's like, oh, we don't need cooling, we're in a mild climate. And I remember just, my business partner and I, Owen, constantly banging our heads against the wall. We're like, you guys all agree climate change is happening. Why can't we put cooling in these? What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, honestly, no, it's
right?
nuts. And I come from Toronto, right? And in Toronto, like everything is air conditioned. Like everywhere you kind of go, like it's like there's like cooling in most buildings. And then for me moving to Vancouver, I'm like, oh wow, like wait, apartments don't just come with air conditioning. Like it's just not a thing here, which is crazy.
600 people died during that heat wave in Vancouver.
Wow, I did not know that. 600.
Because there's nowhere to go, and the nights didn't cool down.
Yeah, it didn't.
Yeah, and so you can't bring your internal body temperature down. You just can't.
That's nuts. All right. Well, no, it's
sorry. Sorry to get so dark on you.
No worries.
About software. I'm talking about social justice issues.
No worries. No, there's obviously, it's a real problem that that you're trying to solve here. So no, that's great. And I think like to kind of wrap it up, Michael, like what is one piece of advice you could leave for our early stage, mid stage founders listening in?
It's the number one thing is you need good partners. You need you need to surround yourself with great people. It's the number one thing, because you'll never be good at all the pieces that you need, because businesses are so complicated. So complicated. HR, accounting, tax, legal, like you just don't be afraid to just like, don't try and do, there's a lot of things you should not try and do on your own. In fact, most things. So just create the best team and just surround yourself with good partners.
Fair enough. Awesome. Michael, thank you so much for coming on to our show. If our listeners want to find and connect with you, where can they find you?
I'm at Airsset.com, or just connect with me on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn.
Friendly.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much.